And we are live. So, welcome to today's Ask Karen, which is where I get to interview our members and they get to share a little bit about who they are, what they do, because as we've said along, the title coach doesn't really mean anything until we actually have a conversation around what they do. So, Beverley, if you could share with the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Hello, Karen. So lovely to see you. So I've actually called myself now a recovery practitioner because wellness coach doesn't necessarily say enough. I'm very much about the mind-body connection, as we all are, but I very much go into recovery from chronic fatigue, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, because our body is very much connected to our mental wellness as well. So I get frustrated with the word mental illness because it suggests that it's all in the head, and it's not. And I understand we have to have a word for communication, and I'm not saying that I've got the right word, but when we're having messages being sent to our brain or our neurological part of our brain, amygdala, that's when the alarm system goes on and our body thinks it needs to keep us safe. So it releases adrenaline and it starts to shut down our body. Now, a bit of adrenaline sometimes is what we need. That's what gives us up and the go. But when it's constant, so when we're stressed and it's constant, when we've experienced a lot of stress and trauma, particularly in our childhood growing up, we learn to react rather than be proactive. And that's because of how the brain functions. I could carry on speaking about this for a long, long time, but I can't.
I know. I mean, it's such I love what you do, and it is such. Now people, I think, are realizing that there is this 100% connection between the mind and the body. There's stuff going on, there's cells changing, there's hormones being released, there's stuff going on that really is affecting us. And I really think that over the last 2 years, people understand that now.
I think they're now becoming more aware because, sadly, as a community, regardless of how your views, regardless of how it's impacted you, it did impact us all in different ways. And I think that's the united understanding that we've got about the effects of stress or trauma, but even being isolated. Let me give you a fact that one thing about a coping mechanism, especially when we're struggling with our mental wellness and even our physical wellness, because it goes hand in hand, is that we sometimes isolate ourselves. That's our coping mechanism. And when it's enforced, it can be as impactful to us physically as is meant, and is the equivalent of smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. That's the impact it has on our body. So even if you're not smoking, we have to look at the underlying cause.
Oh, 100%. And I do, you know, because we can't, I always say to people, I wish we had, which I'm sure they're probably working on because science fiction comes first. And then, you know, one of those scanners, having like something like a Star Trek where you could scan yourself daily. So because we can't see what's going on in the body, and so people think it's just up here, but they don't realize that what is up here is having a direct effect to what's going on here.
Yeah, and that's when our body actually speaks to us through the pains, through the headaches, migraine, irritable bowel, chronic pain. So chronic pain is when there's no swelling, there's no damage, it's not a broken bone, it's not a torn ligament, but it's sometimes we become so used to it, but we're also looking at the symptom and we think that if we take a tablet, that will stop it. But chronic pain is when you've had the pain 3 months or more. So you can have an operation thinking that will relieve the pain, but actually 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, you still have the pain. And that's when we need to look at what's underneath. And that's what I do within coaching. So where I specialise in adults looking back at childhood trauma and abuse, it's amazing. Half my clients come to me that haven't necessarily recognised that something that happened in their childhood has impacted them today. Because again, we have misnomers there. But what I do is, we're not looking at each and every experience of stress or trauma, abuse. What we're looking at is how we react in stressful situations.
And
Because
that is the key, isn't it?
that is the key, because that's when, once we've done that, we can look at the belief behind it, and we can start to build together a wellness toolbox. And I always talk about this self-care, and use different tools at different times.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about that it's the reaction, which is why it's never the thing. And I suppose maybe what's happened, if I look back at, what would be the traditional way of doing things, is always they're looking at the thing, which then all the focus is on the thing rather than looking at the recovery about that. Yeah, it's about how you react. And then again, it's just this habitual pattern. But so many, and trust me, people close to me that will still take ownership of whatever it is they're struggling with, as though they need to be fixed. Like, then you're not broken, you're just in a cycle of a habitual pattern of reacting to certain things. And for some reason, that has been I don't know, maybe that's what we've been conditioned to believe, that when we, like you said about, mental illness, it's not a great word, is it? Because it's almost like saying that there's something wrong with you when there isn't anything wrong with you. It's just a transitional period. Am I sort of on?
And this is where so people have said to me, and I'll be very honest, I have thought this in the past as well. Oh, is this all woo-woo? It's not. I can tell you the science. And going back to the body scan, you can actually see in MRI scans what actually happens in your brain. So I'll give a quick synopsis. We have a left and a right-hand part of our brain. The left-hand side is the reactive part, and the right-hand side is our proactive. It's our forward thinking, it's our dreaming, it's our, looking ahead. And then you have the frontal cortex. Okay. Now, when our amygdala sets the alarm off, it's the reactive brain that sends a message to our body, and we don't actually have a choice at that time how we react. Okay. It shuts down the creative part, and we get what we call foggy brain. So even like when we're stressed, and the simplest of things that we do every day, we suddenly can't do, and we lose our memory, and we can't concentrate. And that is to keep us safe, so that we're not questioning it. So when you go back into prehistoric times, our body will have sensed, oh, hold on, I can hear a noise, or I can sense something's not right. And it will make a decision to either fight. So some people become aggressive, and we see that at the moment with grief. Some people might want to run away. So, yeah, that's not happening. Thank you very much. That's denial.
Yeah,
and then
that would be mine.
And other people will freeze. So they want to say so much, or they want to do it, but they're frozen. And other people may flop. So they just literally pass out when things get too much, and I've been there. So and also there's one other one, is befriend. So when we look at what's around us, so sometimes there's a reason for every one of them, and it's not that you'll necessarily only do one. So if you're in a work environment and you have to get on with someone that you don't like, it's a coping mechanism, you're befriending. And that can be as challenging and have an impact on you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's, as you know, I come from totally the physical side of things, the fitness. But, when we think about it logically, and I hope that people can get this, that think of it just from a purely physical point of view. If you need to save your life, you need to run away, fight or freeze. From a physiological point of view, the blood is going to be pushed to the extremities, to the muscles, because you've got to get ready to go. You've got that fast twitch fiber. You've got to sprint away or freeze or hide, which means if all the energy is going to the extremities, to the muscles, not so much, even from a health point of view, the digestive system gets left.
Get shut down.
Everything else is shut down. And yeah, like you say, it's not the art, not the time to get creative about what you're going to do tomorrow in your business, is it, when you're in stress? Which is why you say, when you said about the procrastination and it being a negative word, I get that, because yes, it's a natural reaction, because if you're always being pumped, ready to run away, fight or freeze, yes, to think creatively is not the most important thing, because saving your life is. So it makes so much sense, but I don't think people understand that, yes, we're not running away from a saber-toothed tiger anymore, but perception of fear has the same reaction as real threats. Yes. So I don't think they understand that even their level of stress is having that much of an impact, but it is, isn't it?
Yes, but we get so used to it. And Karen, what happens in our everyday life becomes our norm. So for your viewers that don't know, I come from a childhood that's full of stress. But at the age, right up until I had my own children and I had that mirror, I didn't realise the impact of it. So at the age of 4, I was removed from my family with my siblings, and a black police van pulled up, the old Black Mariah, and I can remember it like it was yesterday.
Wow.
The doors were open, and whilst the police lady in her uniform was lovely, I wasn't focused on her. I was focused on the civilian, as I would say in adulthood, the people dressed in ordinary clothes whispering and watching their body language. And then this lovely, smiley policewoman took us by our hands and took us in the back of a police van and took us to Penge Police Station. Wow. I can still tell you now the size of the room, what was on the filing cabinet. There were sandwiches. She tried to offer us something to eat. And then we went into care. Now, for me, it was the best experience, but there's still other trauma that comes with that. And we were going backwards and forwards between our parental family home and the children's home. Then at 10, they wanted to send us back to live with our family completely. There were 6 children by now that my mum had kept. And we went back home, but I didn't want to. So for 3 nights, I had night terrors. And at the age of 10, I was comforted. I didn't have the words to share, and I wasn't asked about why I was crying.
Right.
It's like, shh, come on.
Be quiet.
Yeah. And it wasn't done in a horrible way either. So can you see about how that perceived?
Yes, threat? It's all perception, isn't it? It's all
absolutely.
Perception.
So then we went to live at home with our mum and dad, which is perceived by everyone to be the best thing. But what people didn't know was we were in such abject poverty, we didn't even have gas and electric in the end.
Wow.
And I became the main carer. Even at the age of 12, I was doing the shopping, the cleaning. And when I say ironing, called off the iron and heated it on one of the camper stoves, the little ones, the little ones.
Oh my God. What, to get it hot enough?
To get it hot to iron. Because I'd learned in the children's home about self-care and awareness and presenting yourself. So
even at that age, even at that such a young age.
Yeah, because we didn't want to get bullied.
Wow.
So can you see how you're learning?
Totally. That's we only know by our past experiences and then how we've reacted, and then maybe even like from my own daughter will see she's learned because she would observe.
Yes.
What's got, and so then she'd learn how to adapt differently to certain things. It's a phenomenal. I mean, it's such a wide ranging of things that can happen to people.
Yeah. Well, not
That
only
can
that,
affect.
if you think of a young child going into school, so not only that, I'm witnessing my parents were alcoholics, there were fights. My mum wasn't beaten, they were fighting. She would, yeah, sad, you know, I can say that, and that's no disrespect to any woman or man in a domestic violence relationship, but they were physically fighting, the pair of them. So then you go to school. Now, there are two different ways of reacting there. Either you focus and that is your only way of coping and you study, or can you imagine sitting down to do something that's a little bit challenging and you've got all of that happening at home?
No.
Your brain can't function.
Well, no. And that is the difference, isn't it? I suppose children get, well, you've got to be doing them. Why aren't you doing this? When they actually physically can't.
They can't. Or if they've got a really good home life at home, they may be walking into a school where they're being bullied.
Yeah. So it's totally different scenarios,
Yeah.
but actual similar what's going on the inside.
Yeah. So our body is going to react and think, oh, I don't like being in this environment. Where is that person? And that person could be a teacher. It could be one other, a child in the school. It could be several.
Yeah.
But they're on high alert. So then asking your brain to be open to learning new knowledge when you're like everywhere around you, you know, you're hyper vigilant. It's like safety. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's when you start talking about that learning mechanism that, yes, you find a way to survive, and the resilience in children and people is amazing. We are built to survive. So when we're learning to get pushed through and we take that into our adult life and we learn to push through, work hard,
Yeah.
play hard, etc. One of the key things that we often learn not to do is just take time and check in with ourselves and just be.
You've just, that word be, that's more powerful than anything. And we've been conditioned, haven't we? Some people, I know a lot of people think it's almost like they feel guilty if they're going to sit down and do nothing, because again, we've been conditioned through, I don't know, school, just culture, just the rat race that we find ourselves in, that somehow, and should I say, women maybe more, I'm not saying all, but the demands on women maybe in certain circumstances more so than guys. In the traditional, you're at home, you've got the kids, it's almost like women can feel guilt for sitting and being.
But I'm going to look at it from both ways. Let's be fair and look at
Yeah, I know. It is for both.
Yeah, social norms and how we're brought up. So, you know, women are nurturers. They look after the children. I'm not saying men don't, but we're just looking at the overarching. So women have the messages. You know, you see it on our cards. You see it in our toys right from the get-go. Although I did love Lego and the cars as well.
Action
I
Man.
loved all of that. Yeah. So, but the messages are there all subliminally. That is your role to nurture. And if you then add in the work, you do the work and you still nurture and you look after the home. Okay. Now, on a different end, men are brought up. You will be the one that will go out to earn that money. You will be the one that they are going to look to, and you need to provide for your family. You are the one, man up. You cannot show your emotions. You cry, that's weak. Men don't cry. Men don't talk. Get on with it.
Yeah.
So can you see how we receive the messages?
Yes, and that's why men are struggling so much more now, because there's been so much pressure put on them, and if they lost their job and on furlough, and it has been too much.
And traditionally, and you know, I've just received another certificate in this area, so I'm going to share some facts. But the biggest killer of men is death by suicide,
which is disgusting. So basically,
age 50 and under,
preventable.
Absolutely. And even by having this conversation, we can save one life, whereas normally and traditionally people think, oh, don't talk about suicide because we'll cause it. Actually, we won't.
No, it should be talked about more, because there is, if they knew, the only reason they have done that is because they couldn't see a way out. But there is.
Yeah. And there's also an increase in young women. So it's not that more men become embroiled in self-harm, and because self-harm isn't necessarily going to lead to suicide, but it's not a mental illness either. It's the response to the mental anguish.
Yes.
And both of them are. It's a response. It's a belief that there are no other options.
There. It's just that, which is just so sad, because yes, in my mind, every single one of those lives could have been saved.
Absolutely. And it's not that they didn't want to. So when somebody says, or, you know, I'm feeling suicidal, actually, there is another way to look at it. I'm looking for support. I don't know how to ask for it.
Yes.
I don't know where to go for it. And I'm scared.
But they do now. They can come to you, Bev.
Yes.
So this link underneath. So can you tell us just quickly a little bit about that?
Certainly. So we've been talking about some challenging things, and to some people it's going to be ticking off little alarm bells, and some people will know this but not sure where to go. And I'm all about self-care. So when I use positive words, it's about reframing. So it's not saying that we won't look at anything that's challenging, because life does bring up challenges. But if we're able to understand about our own self-care, that will enable us to be in a better place to deal with things. So my 7 steps to self-care is showing you 7 different things that you can introduce into your life. And when I say that, the first thing has to be breath. Because when we're stressed, we only breathe from here, and that affects our organs. And regardless of food, regardless of water, without breath, we don't have life. So it's giving you a clear explanation. It's not to be overwhelming, it's step by step. And there's information at the bottom of it about workshops if anybody would be interested in joining. And as they will hear today, we're looking at the physicality first, because that is our body that is telling us, and we're unable to hear what it's trying to say.
Brilliant. Fantastic. I mean, you know, Bev, we go quite a way back now, and I'm so glad. And for those who are listeners, Bev, together with her business partner Chris, will be hosting their own podcast channel under our network. So I'm so excited to be working with you moving forward as well. So for the members, or for the guys out there that for the Ask Karen section, what question did you have with regarding for people, other coaches, consultants out there building their business?
Right, I love this challenge, and it got me really thinking. And one of the things that really came on board to me was I had websites when we very first started online. You know, remember we used to dial in, you get that little noise?
Oh my goodness, yes.
I even remember being at a women's conference in London and having this new iPhone that I'd had for about 6 months, and I didn't even know how to upload an app back then. And there was a VA, which I had no idea what that meant, which is a virtual assistant for anybody, because I don't like acronyms. And I was watching her, and she was tweeting, and I'd already been told, oh, don't bother with that, don't bother with that. And I'm like, well, I'm interested to know, because that's me. I'm curious, nosy, however you want to say it. And she told me what she was doing. So I said, oh, could you put it on my phone for me? Anyway, that opens up a great world for me. And I learned so much about social media and the impact. But back then, social media was a totally different concept. And I learned a lot about it. And I actually did social media at one time for my own business, but for other people as well as a sideline. But now it's erupted in such a different way, and I'm not always looking at social media or putting on social media because I'm busy in my own world. So it suddenly came to me, rather than just staying with one, like what you know, I'm back at that table, if you want to put it like that, And I'd just like be interested to know if there was one, platform that you would use for social media. What would be your platform that you would go for?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't think there's any one size fits all. So I think
No.
if you ask 10 different people, you'd get different answers, right? Um, the way I do see it, though, still, is a lot of people, if they're going more, if they think they're more executive, more corporate, they believe, again, perception, that LinkedIn is the way to go. And in some aspects, I would say maybe. However, the caveat to that would be I would suggest the majority of people on LinkedIn are also on Facebook. So for me personally, and how we've built our business, Facebook is the number one platform for us. The reason being is that it is a bit easier to find your target audience. With LinkedIn, you can be quite restricted. You can only sort of send requests to your first, it's a bit restricted. Whereas Facebook, you could find people, you could choose, I don't know, one particular town in America and
Yes.
go and find them. You can find people a lot easier. So if you're using social media and you're not spending money on ads, okay, I suppose that's going to be a different thing. Because we personally use attraction marketing methods, Facebook all day, every day.
Yes.
Some will say, TikTok is smashing it with videos. It again depends what type you are. If you're an introvert, maybe TikTok isn't going to be the right platform for you. So there isn't really a right answer because, yes, we've got YouTube, TikTok, Insta, all of it, right? But treating a business as a business, what we have found is Facebook is the one.
Yes. And I will say Facebook works for me, but that's also because I'm looking at a certain age target audience. That's not to say I don't use Instagram because that raises awareness as well, but it's a younger audience. It's getting older, but no, it's really interesting. And thank you for that, Karen. The one thing that's interesting about LinkedIn for me, and it's something we were talking about before we started recording, is before the last couple of years, if you mention the word trauma within a business environment, that was just like, oh, no, that's too deep. That's too much. If you were to share anything personal, you're oversharing. This is a business environment. And one thing I've enjoyed seeing is that coming together, the speaking, the sharing, and LinkedIn, I can see a real different analogy during the week to the weekend.
Interesting. Yes, I can see why. It makes sense, doesn't it? And yeah, I think it is definitely opening up. It may be, I think a lot of people maybe moved on to LinkedIn that maybe weren't on there before. And obviously now everybody's experienced, like you said, everybody's experienced some form of trauma in the last few years, depending on how they've reacted to being on their own or lockdown or whatever. So, yes, I think I shouldn't use the word softened people up, but it's somehow opened maybe people who had a different outlook and were very regimented. I think it's opened them up to, this is a real thing.
But in the words of Brené Brown, I love it because it's showing the courage to be vulnerable. And if we're going to work together as a team and be united, that's the hardest part, is learning to be vulnerable and say, you know what, I can't do this, or this is too much for me, which allows other people to come and support.
Because they do want to. People do want
Yes,
to support. Isn't it funny that it's like on this side, people are too afraid to actually reach out for help. But then this other side that would gladly give support and help and advice.
and we don't know how to. And I put my hands up to that. When I look back in my life, being vulnerable has been the biggest challenge for me, and it's still something I have to work on because
100% agree.
our perception. It's our perceptions.
100% agree. And my besties, my friends would say that that was my, and I probably have got a lot of bit more male energy quite often. Probably why I have pink hair. Just a reminder. But my saying was, deal with it.
Yeah.
I was quite harsh. I totally admit that was my go-to. Like, yeah, deal with it. And I recognize that can be a bit of a trauma response. I get it now. It's all, we're all growing, we're all healing. But thank you so much for your time, Bev. It's been, as always, it's always great speaking to you, even though the subject matter can be for some, but there's always a positive
Absolutely
result. It's not about the thing, it's about putting out there that there is a positive outlook on this. So for anybody that is struggling, or anybody get them in touch. So Thanks for your time. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Karen, and bye.